Hello, and welcome to Show Me History. I'm your host, Amy Blankenship. Basing her teachings on German philosophy, methods of Friedrich Froebel, and the pre-existing kindergarten programs, Susan Blow developed the first continuous kindergarten program supported by public funds in America. Her first class at a pair school was in St. Louis, Missouri. Blow's kindergarten and teacher training program would spur on a movement of early childhood across America. Susan Blow was born on June 7, 1843 in St. Louis, Missouri. She was the oldest of 6 children born to Henry Taylor Blow and Minerva Grimsley. Mama's family owned a saddle company that had contracts with the U.S. government. Her parents were Colonel Thornton Grimsley and Susan Stark. They were prominent citizens in the city, owning the National Hotel at 3rd and Market. Colonel Grimsley had quite a political life, serving as alderman, state rep, and state senator. He worked with Mayor Darby to turn the city commons into what we now know as Lafayette Square and Lafayette Square Park. Papa's family moved from Southampton County, Virginia in 1830. His parents were Captain Peter Blow and Elizabeth Taylor. They owned Dred Scott, and he is a rather famous enslaved person in St. Louis history. When they moved to St. Louis, they opened a boarding house and sold their slaves, including Dred Scott. The family soon fell upon hard times. In 1831, Elizabeth died, and her husband followed suit a year later. Papa, Henry, graduated from St. Louis University and began an apprenticeship in law. At the time of his parents' death, he was forced to become a clerk at his brother-in-law's business. His sister Charlotte had married Joseph Charles Jr., whose father owned and operated the first newspaper west of the Mississippi. When Joseph Charles Sr. died, Henry Blow was made a partner. Their company later became Collier White Lead and Oil Company, one of the largest factories in St. Louis. In 1840, Henry met and married Minerva Grimsley. Susan Blow spent the first 5 years of her life at 134 Elm Street, located on the riverfront downtown. In May of 1849, the family's home was destroyed by the Great Fire of St. Louis. The combination of their house burning down and the cholera epidemic raging through the city at the time threw Papa into a decision to move the family to a community 5 miles south of St. Louis. Carondelet at the time was a French settlement. Minerva's parents had given them 16 acres of land here a few years back. The Blow family built a Greek Revival-style mansion known as Old Southampton. Susan had quite a unique childhood for her time. Both parents encouraged education for all of their children. Their house, Old Southampton, had an expansive library where all the children were free to read what they pleased. Henry established and funded a public school in Carondelet. This was before the area became part of St. Louis proper. Henry and Minerva were also abolitionists and politically involved in the affairs of St. Louis. Henry encouraged Dred Scott to sue Dr. Emerson for his freedom, and although Scott lost the case, the Blow family continued to support the Scotts, providing for attorney fees. At the death of Dr. Emerson, he bequeathed Dred Scott to Henry, who freed Scott. Susan was given the finest education possible in St. Louis. Her father hired a private teacher from Philadelphia and created a private school for her and her friends. At the age of 16, she was sent to a private school in New York ran by Henrietta Haynes. Within a few years, the Civil War broke out, and Susan was forced to return to St. Louis as school was suspended. During her time at school, Susan's father Henry had served as a state rep and senator. He also served as a delegate to the National Republican Convention that nominated Abraham Lincoln. His service in local politics was expanding to a national level. And in 1869, President Grant appointed Henry Blow as minister to Brazil. His main task was to balance the trade deficit. The entire family moved with him and spent 2 years in South America. During this time, Susan served as his private secretary. Before heading back to the States, the Blow family embarked on a year-long tour of Europe. While in Europe, Susan had the opportunity to observe a kindergarten class using the methods of Friedrich Froebel. She had read about his teaching methods and was excited to see them in practice. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes here talking about Froebel. So Friedrich Froebel was born in 1872 in Saxony, which is now part of Germany. And although he set out to be an architect, he became a teacher. Froebel created the term kindergarten, which means children's garden, and he based his philosophies on those of Immanuel Kant and Hegel and some others at the time. And he developed his own teaching methods and curriculum for kindergarten, and his first school opened in 1840 in Blankenburg, Germany. In Froebel's kindergarten, he used a system of gifts and occupations to engage children and invoke the learning process. His 10 gifts were specifically designed toys, each having a particular purpose to develop skills and knowledge. For example, the first gift is 6 woolen balls of various colors. They're meant to give the impression of unity, form, color, mobility, and directions. I tend to think of Froebel's gifts as a Montessori-type toy. I know education people, don't yell at me. I know that Froebel and Maria Montessori are 2 completely different schools of thought on child development, that just this one aspect seems similar. And the 5 occupations that Froebel developed were activities meant to enhance creativity, communication, and develop problem solving. These would be actions like playing with clay and stringing beads. The gifts and occupations were meant for children to learn through play. Froebel believed that education for children should start early, shortly after birth, and that children should engage in active and meaningful play. His classrooms were also co-educational, something that was completely unheard of at the time. He believed that this point in a child's life should be focused on the introduction of learning concepts, not rote memorization, test, and strict discipline. In 1841, kindergarten was banned in all of Prussia and includes modern-day Germany. It was seen as a radical idea that would convert small children to atheism. A year later, Froebel passed away. Although the concept and practice of kindergarten would not prosper in the German states at this time, it would become widespread in other parts of the world. Immigrants would bring their idea with them to new countries, and people like Susan Blow, who had witnessed the kindergarten classes, would go back to their communities to emulate the concept. Kindergarten was a new and controversial idea at the time, but America was ripe for its implementation. The nation as a whole was beginning a movement to save children. They were concerned about the corruption of young children by the conditions of inner-city life and poverty. After the Civil War, states began to take a role in protecting children against poverty, abuse, and neglect. Tenement children could benefit from kindergarten to grow up in a moral and disciplined environment, capable of taking their place in society as adults. Children of affluent families would benefit by developing character and creative powers, so they could take their proper place in community affairs. The superintendent of St. Louis schools, William Torrey Harris, once said, quote, "A child in poverty is saved by the good of associations and the industrial and intellectual training he gets. If he is a child of wealth, he is saved by the kindergarten from ruin through self-indulgence and corruption ensuing on weak management in the family." End quote. Upon her return to St. Louis, Susan Blow met with St. Louis School Superintendent William Torrey Harris to discuss opening a kindergarten. Blow's father offered to fund a private kindergarten for her to instruct, but she declined. She felt that a public school setting would reach more children. In the meantime, Blow served as a substitute teacher for the St. Louis public schools. William Torrey Harris was a leader of the St. Louis movement and the same mindset as Blow. The St. Louis movement was a philosophy that education was vital in procuring necessary social change. Not far from aligning with philosophies of Emerson and Alcott of the Concord School of Thought on the East Coast. Harris believed the establishment of a kindergarten would help children of St. Louis. He had become superintendent in 1868 and ordered a series of black reports to examine the distribution of children to determine ways to better serve the community. The result of the black studies showed that the levee and factory districts held children that only attended the first 3 years of school. Harris believed that permitting children in these slum areas to start school at a younger age would have a lifelong benefit for them. On his own, Harris approached the school board requesting to lower the admittance age. The school board rejected this idea. Harris saw a change in the traditional socializing agents such as the family, church, and state. The family was having a diminishing role as more families had two working parents. The formative years of children were not well provided for by families. In Harris's view, kindergarten could fill this void. In an 1872 annual report to the board, Harris said, quote, "The child who passes his years in the misery of the crowded tenement house or alley becomes early familiar with all manner of corruption and immorality. The children thus unhappily situated are fortunate if they are placed at work even in their tender years, and taught habits of industry though deprived of school education. The unfortunate ones grow up in crime, but if they can receive an education at school besides the education in useful industry, they are more than fortunate. Their destiny is in their own hands." End quote. Harris was finally permitted to appoint a committee of 3 men to research the idea of kindergarten and its feasibility. All 3 men had connections to the Blow family, either through business or politics. The committee recommended opening a kindergarten to the school board. They created a kindergarten committee of 6 men and appointed Susan Blow as the director of kindergarten. Susan returned to New York to attend Miss Haynes' school once more. This time she would meet with fellow Froebel enthusiasts to expand her knowledge of his theories and practices. On August 26, 1873, the School Board of St. Louis firmly decided to create and open a kindergarten and a pair school located on South Michigan Avenue. The existence of a kindergarten would be an experiment for 1 year. The De Pere School was a 4-room schoolhouse designed by German architect Friedrich Froebel. It was designed to include light and ventilation in each classroom. The complete opposite of any existing classroom, Blow's kindergarten classroom was colorful, had plants, decorations, and plenty of natural light. The furniture was made especially for young students, low benches and tables that can easily accommodate small children. The first kindergarten class consisted of 63 pupils, boys and girls. Blow was the teacher and 3 unpaid assistants. The first class focused on teaching young children virtues and values necessary for manners and disciplines of life in a community. There was an emphasis on moral, discipline, hygiene, and the etiquette of polite living. Blow used games and gifts from Froebel's theory to enforce and teach these values. The first 6 of Froebel's gifts taught the elementary notions of geometry and basic math. The second group led to drawing and development of eye-hand coordination, and the third group developed manual dexterity, measurement skills, and intellectual activities. Harris believed these skills would be beneficial in a variety of employment fields and leisure time. By 1880, kindergarten was a recognized part of the St. Louis public school system. It had 166 paid teachers, 60 unpaid assistants, and 7,828 students. Although the kindergarten was successful, it was not without controversy. The naysayers complained that kindergarten was un-American and foreign idea and a waste of taxpayers' money. In 1878, a lawsuit was filed against the school board. People alleged that the St. Louis City schools are common schools and should only teach the rudiments of education, and that children under 6 cannot be lawfully admitted to common schools. In return, the school board argued that it was charged with providing instruction as necessary for rendering pupils good and useful citizens. The age of students and curriculum administered by the school fell under this charge. The case made its way to the Missouri Supreme Court. The court affirmed that the school board had its discretion in choosing appropriate subject matter for its schools. However, it prohibited the use of public funds to educate children under the age of 6. The school board created an admission fee of $1 per quarter for children 5 years of age. Free instruction was provided for children 6 and older. The success of Blow's kindergarten was in part to its location within St. Louis. The Carondelet area held a large German population who were already familiar with the concept of kindergarten. The German residents of Carondelet formed the Carondelet German Turnverein. This was a type of fitness club that also encouraged intellectual pursuits and political involvement. They strongly supported kindergarten and saw it as a natural addition to the city school system. Other cities began basing their kindergarten programs on the St. Louis model. Many districts sent teachers to Susan Blow and the St. Louis training system to learn the ways of Froebel. Blow developed a specific teaching program. After 6 months of lecture and hands-on experience, participants would be certified to teach kindergarten. The program consisted of mornings with the kindergarten class. In the afternoon, they would receive instruction through lectures. Based on Froebel's theories, the certificate program focused on the concept that kindergarten was a time of development and not necessarily instruction. The idea was not to begin primary education earlier, but to develop young minds and bodies for a life of academics. Kindergarten was to instill a desire to learn before engaging in the 3 R's. It was said of students in higher grades, it was tellable which had attended kindergarten and which had not. Their teachers said the students that attended kindergarten had a greater ability to express themselves, had better manual skills, and possessed a larger basis of knowledge than students who began school without attending kindergarten. Barely 10 years after the start of her kindergarten, Susan's health began to fail as she was suffering from grave disease. In 1884, Susan retired and moved to Boston. There she helped found the International Kindergarten Union. In 1895, she moved to New York to live with her sister. There she also sought treatment at Leffingwell Sanatorium for Graves' disease. Although Susan was no longer teaching, she toured the country giving lectures on her methods. She also used this time to write books on Froebel's philosophy and her own curriculum. On March 26, 1960, Susan Blow passed away in New York. Her body was returned to St. Louis. Services were held at Christ Church Cathedral, and she was interred at her family's plot in Bellefontaine Cemetery. At the time of her death, the St. Louis Globe-Democrat wrote, quote, "A great commander is gone, but soldiers will go marching on." End quote. 25 years after the first kindergarten in St. Louis began, 190,000 children were part of kindergarten programs across the country. Susan Blow believed that education aided in personal, intellectual, and moral development. Children's experiences are important and valuable tools for teaching and helping them develop as an individual. Blow played a significant role in the history and development of early childhood education. She believed that kindergarten served as a transition from family life to the discipline of the school system. You can visit the building that housed her first classroom today. The DePere School is now a museum in the Carondelet Historical Society. Inside, you can see a model of the first kindergarten classroom. The Historical Society also has many of Susan Blow's diaries and family effects. Blow Street, which runs through South St. Louis from Mississippi River to South Broadway, also bears the name of the family. Thank you for joining me today. You can find me at our website at showmehistorystl.com, on Twitter at showme_history, and on Facebook at showmehistorystl. Until next time, I'll see you on the loo.